Hello, I'm Essay, your AI essayist. Please note that all content, audio and video in this presentation are AI generated. As AI can sometimes produce inaccuracies, I encourage you to verify any factual information presented. With that in mind, let's begin.
In the intellectual landscape of mid-19th century medicine, a terrain still shadowed by the lingering spectres of ancient humorism and speculative vitalism, a singular idea emerged with the force of a fundamental law of nature. This conception, articulated with unparalleled clarity and empirical force by the German physician and polymath Rudolf Virchow, located the entirety of pathology, the grand and terrifying theatre of disease, within the microscopic confines of the living cell. The crystallization of his thought around 1855, culminating in the 1858 publication of his masterwork, Cellular Pathology, represents one of the great epistemological ruptures in the history of science. It was an intellectual revolution that provided medicine with its modern, material foundation. Virchow's cellular pathology was far more than a new theory. It was a new way of seeing, a new grammar for interpreting the body in sickness and in health. By establishing the cell as the ultimate arbiter of life's processes, he transformed pathology from a catalogue of morbid symptoms into a dynamic scientific discipline, grounded in the belief that all disease is ultimately cellular disease. Understanding this monumental achievement requires an appreciation of the theoretical milieu he challenged, a detailed examination of his central doctrine, and a tracing of its profound and enduring legacy through the subsequent evolution of biological science. To grasp the revolutionary character of Virchow's work, one must first survey the world he inherited. The dominant medical paradigms were deeply rooted in abstract, systemic explanations. The ancient doctrine of Galenic humorism, which attributed disease to an imbalance of four bodily fluids: blood, phlegm, yellow bile, and black bile, persisted with remarkable tenacity, offering explanations that were comprehensive in scope yet devoid of empirical verification at a fine-grained level. A more recent and promising development was the tissue theory of the French anatomist Xavier Bichat, who at the turn of the 19th century had localized disease to the body's 21 distinct tissues. This was a crucial step toward anatomical specificity, moving the locus of pathology from ethereal fluids to tangible structures. Yet, Bichat's work remained at the macroscopic level, his analysis ceasing at the threshold of the microscope. The necessary next step into the cellular realm was taken by a duo of German botanist Matthias Schleiden and physiologist Theodor Schwann in as of 1838 and with 1839. They proposed that all living things, plants and animals alike, were composed of cells. This was a unifying principle of immense power. Their theory, however, contained a fundamental error regarding cellular origins. They posited that new cells arose from a formless, proteinaceous liquid they termed the cytoplasma, precipitating into existence much like crystals forming in a solution. This concept of spontaneous generation, or de novo formation, rendered the cell a somewhat passive and discontinuous entity, a product of a mysterious life force animating a primordial ooze. It was this specific tenet of the cytoplasma that became the primary target of Virchow's intellectual assault. His own thinking was sharpened by the work of his teacher, the great physiologist Johannes Müller, who championed the microscope as an indispensable tool for biological inquiry. It was also crucially preceded by the quiet, meticulous work of Robert Vermaak, who in 1852 provided direct microscopic evidence of cell division in chick embryos, demonstrating that cells arise from the cleavage of pre-existing cells. This observation, though initially receiving little fanfare, provided the empirical bedrock for Virchow's forthcoming maxim. This scientific ferment occurred within a potent political context. Virchow was a passionate liberal, a participant in the revolutions of 1848, and a tireless advocate for public health and social reform. His political vision of a democratic state found a powerful biological metaphor in his conception of the body as a cell state, a cooperative republic of individual citizens, whose rights and functions determined the health of the whole. Pathology, in this view, was akin to a civil war, a local disturbance among a specific population of cells. The conceptual heart of Virchow's entire edifice is captured in a simple, elegant Latin aphorism: omnis cellula e cellula, meaning all cells from a cell. With these four words, he severed the ties to the blastema theory and established the principle of continuous cell lineage as the central axiom of biology. Life did not spontaneously generate from an amorphous fluid. It was passed down in an unbroken chain from one cell to its progeny. The seemingly straightforward statement carried revolutionary implications. If all cells came from other cells, then pathological cells of a tumor, the pus of an abscess, the inflamed tissue surrounding a wound must also arise from the normal cells of the body. Disease, therefore, was a process, a deviation of normal cellular life. It was, in Virchow's memorable phrasing, life under altered conditions, he armed this powerful idea with a rigorous methodology centered on the microscopic examination of diseased tissues, a practice he pursued with unmatched zeal at the Charité Hospital in Berlin, where he amassed an unparalleled collection of pathological specimens. His application of this principle to specific medical mysteries yielded immediate and spectacular results. He redefined inflammation, long considered a systemic ailment of the blood, as a fundamentally local and active cellular response to an irritant characterized by cellular proliferation, degeneration, and functional changes. His classic work on thrombosis and embolism provided a model of mechanical cause and effect reasoning. He painstakingly traced the formation of blood clots, which he termed thrombi, within blood vessels and demonstrated how fragments could break off, travel through the circulation as emboli, and lodge in distant organs like the lungs or brain, causing catastrophic damage. This elegant demonstration replaced vague notions of constitutional predisposition with a clear, physical mechanism. In the realm of cancer, he established that a tumour is a mass of the body's own cells gone awry, proliferating without regard for the normal architecture and function of the host tissue. He showed that cancer cells, like all cells, arose from pre-existing cells, laying the essential groundwork for the entire field of oncology. He even coined the term leukemia, recognizing it as a disease characterized by pathological overproduction of white blood cells, a pathology originating in the blood-forming tissues. In every case, Virchow's approach was consistent. He localized the disease, identified the cellular players, and described the pathological process as a modification of normal cellular physiology. Pathology was thus unified with physiology, brought out of the realm of morbid anatomy and into the light of dynamic biology. The impact of this conceptual framework was both immediate and transformative. Virchow's cellular pathology provided a rational, scientific foundation for diagnosis and research that swept through the medical world. The microscope, once a tool for a few specialized researchers, became an essential instrument for the practicing clinician. Biopsy, the removal and examination of a small piece of tissue from a living patient, became a routine and invaluable diagnostic procedure, allowing physicians to directly observe the cellular reality of a disease. Similarly, the autopsy was elevated from a mere confirmation of the cause of death to a scientific investigation into the cellular chain of events that led to the patient's demise. Medical education was restructured around this new cellular paradigm, with students learning to recognize the microscopic signatures of various ailments. The influence of his work rippled outward, shaping the future of biological science. Cellular pathology created the intellectual space for the germ theory of disease to flourish. Although Virchow himself would prove a skeptical critic of the work of Pasteur and Koch, the idea that a bacterium or virus could cause illness by invading and disrupting the life of the body's cells is perfectly congruent with his fundamental principles. The pathogen became simply another form of irritant capable of inducing pathological change at the cellular level. The long-term legacy of Virchow's thinking is immense and pervasive. Modern histopathology, the cornerstone of cancer diagnosis, is a direct continuation of his work. Every time a pathologist examines a tissue slide to differentiate between a benign and a malignant growth, they are operating within the intellectual framework Virchow constructed. The fields of hematology, immunology, and genetics are all built upon the foundational understanding that life's processes, both normal and abnormal, are cellular processes. The contemporary focus on molecular biology and the genetic mutations that drive diseases like cancer represents the ultimate vindication of his vision. The search for the origins of cancer in the sequences of DNA within a single cell is a high-resolution fulfillment of the principle of omnis cellula e cellula. The entire edifice of modern medicine rests upon the bedrock he laid. The cell as the elementary unit of life and a locus of. Despite the towering success and influence of his theory, Virchow is a titan with discernible limits, and his paradigm, like all scientific frameworks, possessed inherent boundaries that invited critique. A most famous and historically significant challenge to his authority came from the burgeoning field of bacteriology. As Louis Pasteur and particularly Robert Koch began to identify specific microorganisms as the causative agents of specific diseases like anthrax and tuberculosis, Virchow remained a prominent and powerful skeptic. His resistance was a complex intellectual stance. He fully accepted the existence of bacteria. His objection was to what he perceived as a simplistic, monocausal reductionism in the new germ theory. He feared that focusing exclusively on the microbial seed would lead medicine to neglect the soiled patient's body, its cellular constitution, and its social and environmental conditions. For Virchow, a bacterium was a necessary factor in a disease like tuberculosis, but it was an insufficient one. The cellular response of the host, shaped by nutrition, sanitation, and individual predisposition, was an equally critical part of the pathological equation. This holistic, multifactorial perspective rooted in his view of the body as a complex cellular society, presaged the modern field of public health and the contemporary understanding of the intricate interplay between pathogen, host, and environment. His skepticism, while ultimately incorrect in its denial of the primary causal role of certain microbes, stemmed from a deep commitment to the complexity of biological reality, a commitment forged in his own cellular paradigm. A smaller, more personal controversy shadowed his career: the matter of priority regarding cell division. The crucial discovery of omnis cellula e cellula through direct observation belongs to Robert Ramac, whose work Virchow initially praised before subsuming the idea into his own grander synthesis, often without sufficient credit. This episode reveals a human, and perhaps overly ambitious, dimension to the scientific luminary, a footnote that reminds us that the history of science is a profoundly human endeavour. These limitations diminish his overall contribution little. They simply define the edges of a paradigm so powerful that its own internal logic shaped its creator's ability to see beyond. In conclusion, Rudolf Virchow's articulation of cellular pathology in the mid-19th century stands as one of the most decisive and fruitful intellectual achievements in the history of medicine. By demolishing the last vestiges of humoral and speculative pathology and establishing the principle of continuous cell lineage through omnis cellula e cellula, he provided a material, verifiable, and dynamic foundation for understanding disease. His work transformed the microscope from a curiosity into a primary instrument of diagnosis, redefined the purpose of clinical investigation, and unified pathology with the mainstream of biological science. From his specific and elegant demonstrations of thrombosis and the cellular nature of cancer to his broader conception of the body as a cell state, Virchow's ideas resonated through every branch of medicine and continued. While his own paradigm constrained his acceptance of the germ theory, his emphasis on the cellular terrain as a critical component of disease remains a vital and increasingly relevant perspective in an age of personalized medicine and public health. He located the drama of life and death within the smallest unit of biological organization, and in doing so, he gave modern medicine its most fundamental and enduring truth: to understand disease, one must first understand the life of the cell.
We really appreciate you tuning into this AI-powered presentation. Our goal is to push the boundaries of AI in content creation, and your input is invaluable. If there's a particular subject you'd like to see us tackle next, or if you have suggestions on how we could fine-tune our AI's creative prompts, please don't hesitate to leave your ideas in the comments section. We're excited to bring you more unique content very soon.